other concluding yesterday. I believe in one day I'd streamed 10 games, 10 or 9 games. But now that all of that is done, we can finally look back and say hello and welcome to another episode of the 2KU Weekly Podcast. We have just wrapped up Conference Championship Week here, and we have plenty of stuff to share with you. Let's hand it off to Danny for our headlines.
Yeah, so first, we got a major upset in Arlington as Baylor has upset the number one team in the nation, who seemed untouchable until the Bears got their revenge. Next up, we got ourselves a shootout in Birmingham as UCF barely escaped against SMU. Next up, St. Louis was taken over by the Maroon Doom. SIU defeats South Dakota State University with the Maroon Doom invading the city. The All Chaos champion as Virginia Tech and Duke delves into more chaos for the conference. As of right now, the bowl selection committee is underway in choosing the bowl games for each team. That should be revealed next week. But enough look in the future, we gotta look at this week as we give a final salute to the regular season as Army and Navy play this weekend. They play in Foxborough, Massachusetts.
We can't look at the
Finally, last
future.
but
We got to
not
look at the
least,
future.
yep. Finally, last but not least, FCS Playoff has just commenced as the bracket has been released, including the Celebration Bowl.
All right. Well, we'll get things started on our scores. Pigbury, you have anything to share about the weekend?
Chaos. That's the one. That's the name of the game. Chaos.
All right. Our first scores here come from Thursday, November 30th. We start in Nashville with the SoCon Championship. The Appalachian State Mountaineers came to the game, number 25 in the country. Mountaineers were looking on the outside for a potential BCS berth, but Old Dominion had other plans, even on their backup quarterback. Old Dominion proved themselves. They now held on to a 49-35 win and their first ever SoCon championship. Danny?
Yeah, that was a great matchup for Appalachian State, and they were competing for a potential BCS spot. And Old Dominion decides to pull out one last magic trick and upset the Mountaineers.
Pig Bear?
Good job, Old Dominion. Just way to get a win in Nashville.
Appalachian State will be going to the Sun Belt next season. On two teams leaving their conference, we now have the Southland, a final duel in San Antonio. The first ever Southland Championship in the Alamo Dome will feature two teams leaving. Stephen F. Austin upsetting a 10-win Sam Houston State, 34-28. The final, basically playing the inverse role that they served last year in order to claim back-to-back titles for the Lumberjacks in the Southland. Danny?
Yeah, Sam Houston State, they must now really be looking down at the season now. Reminder, at one point they started the season undefeated. Now here they are just barely skidding by and then losing several important games. Good job to Stephen F. Austin as they wave, as them and Sam Houston State wave goodbye to the WAC and go to the WAC.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, what a fall for Sam Houston State. Just crazy there.
Next day, we go to Friday, our only overtime game of the weekend. The Conference USA Championship, number 24 SMU giving number 6 UCF all they could handle in Birmingham. The Knights and Mustangs playing their final Conference USA games against each other, and it was UCF who would steal a win away from the Mustangs, 41-38 in overtime. I remember seeing this one live. It was a great finish. Danny, your thoughts on this game?
Sweating bullets. I was sweating bullets during this game, and I was really, really worried for my Knights. But UCF somehow again finds a way to pull off a close win. It's like the sixth close one-score win they've had this season. So great job on the Knights for taking care of business.
Another big win for the University of Cardiac, Florida. Pig Bear?
Time to claim an Addy, UCF. Where have we seen this before? But yeah, just good job, UCF.
They're not done yet. They're likely automatically punched into the BCS next week. We'll have to see where they go specifically, but it's going to be a very interesting spot. As for SMU, their season's not over either. They're still a 10-win team. They'll be heading bowling as well. To the Pac-10 championship. Number 3, Oregon, and number 15, Washington State. As the Ducks controlled this game for the majority of the time, it was a lot more distant than the final score would have you believe. As Oregon pulls out 41-35 for their 13th all-time Pac-10 championship, and they've won 6 since 2011. Danny?
Yeah, it was a really close game for them, and Washington State gave them everything they got, but unfortunately, Oregon still got away, and that game right there helped bring up some questions for the committee, which we'll delve into a little bit later.
Pig Bear?
Just good job to Oregon. Let's see if they can pull it out with the national championship.
That would be the Pac-10's third straight appearance in the national title game. All 3 would have been stream years, with Stanford in 21 and USC last season. They've had 4 appearances in the last 5 years. Oregon went to the Natty back in 2019. Let's see if that goes through to the Missouri Valley Championship for first game on Saturday. South Dakota State and Southern Illinois. SIU looking to get only their second 11-win season in the last decade. Their first since 2013. The Jackrabbits kept it close for a while, but Southern Illinois had a little trick up their sleeve. A big maroon square that showed up in the top left corner of the screen for a short period of time in between their 2 touchdowns. I don't know what caused it. I don't know where it went afterwards. But the Maroon Doom has made its presence known in St. Louis. 31-27, the final score. SIU are your Missouri Valley champions of 2023. This is their 11th conference title, tying Drake for the most all-time by a current Missouri Valley member. Danny?
Great job by Southern Illinois. They had a secret weapon up their sleeves that no one expected, so it's very interesting to see that, but hey, they got the win at least.
Pig Bear?
Salukis getting it done. Good job to SIU.
Up next, we head to Detroit, the Motor City, for the MAC Championship. Kent State and Eastern Michigan both had long droughts that they were hoping to end. Kent State's last title came in 2013. Eastern Michigan's was all the way back in 1999. And for the first time in the 21st century, the Eagles are MAC champions, 35-28. Eastern Michigan pulling away. Danny?
Great job by the Eagles. They did a really good job in securing themselves the MAC championship. And I know it might have been a look down season for Kent State, but hey, at least they made the championship. That's a great thing for them.
I expect to see Kent State continuing to compete for that loaded MAC East. Pig Bear?
Yeah, good job, Eastern Michigan, for getting the win.
Up next, we head to the Big East Championship, another game that was a lot less close than I saw. The last Big East Championship appearance for number 7, Boston College, as they took on West Virginia. And BC dominated most of this game. West Virginia clawed a little closer at the end, but by then it was too late. 24-21 the final. BC improving to 11-2. It's the final title for Boston College in the Big East, and their first title since 1995. Danny?
Yeah, it was a great performance by BC, and what a way to go out as you wave goodbye to your old conference and set sail for the ACC. So good job to the Eagles, and I'm sure the Mountaineers are probably just kicking themselves in the back right now.
I'm sure they'll have to cry themselves to sleep with their 9 conference titles. Pig Bear?
Good job, Boston College. Way to get a victory on the way out.
To the ACC Championship, to the Big 12 Championship up next. This is Game of the Year material out in Arlington. Oklahoma State, number 1 in the country, looking to ride through en route to a national championship appearance there for since 2014. Arlington had been a continuous place of misfortune for the Pokes, going back to 2009, and then, of course, last season in embarrassing fashion as number 1 to Colorado. While granted it was less embarrassing this time around, Baylor a top 10 team, it came down to the last second, and one of the greatest final touchdowns we've ever seen in 2KU history, 23-22. Baylor wins the Big 12 for the second time in 3 years, giving them their third conference title all time. Oklahoma State still waiting. It'll now be, come next season, a decade since their last Big 12 championship. Danny?
Yeah, what a shocker. And Oklahoma State just had to win it just to make it into the national championship game. But here they are losing in an unfortunate way against Baylor. And now this puts our committee into a conundrum. Do they rank Oklahoma State above Oregon, or do they rank Oregon above Oklahoma State? The big question for the committee that we'll have to answer soon.
Both teams are 12-1. Oklahoma State did not win their conference, but Oregon's one loss was to Oklahoma State. That's an interesting debate there. Pig Bear?
What a shocker. Just good job to Baylor for getting it done, though. Do your job.
On to the ACC championship now, where chaos reigns supreme. The best team in the conference is an 11-1 Virginia Tech. They're not playing in this game. Their last loss came to Virginia, who is now number 20 in the country, taking on number 12 Duke. The Cavaliers held control on this one for most of the game, and they get the ACC championship 16-14 over the Blue Devils. The Cavaliers' first conference title since 2006. Danny?
Yeah, that it was a great matchup for Virginia and Duke. It was a fun match, a little rematch from earlier in the season, but Virginia got the revenge and beat Duke, and now the ACC is stuck in a question of who is going to be potentially their big BCS representative. And also, no one would have expected this matchup. Thank goodness we call it the All Chaos Conference.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, just craziness in Charlotte. Just what a way to end out the year for the ACC.
Up next, we're going to take a detour to the FCS, the MEAC and SWAC championships both passing. How about Savannah State nabbing their first ever MEAC title with a 34-27 upset win over the favorite Hampton. Meanwhile, in the SWAC championship, Southern controlling the game late, dominating all throughout to nab a back-to-back title for the Jaguars. 42-21, Southern beating Alabama State. Danny, your thoughts on these two games?
Yeah, great job for these guys. And, well, now here we are going into our Celebration Bowl game between these two teams. And, well, I'm sure it's going to be a fun matchup. I'm sure these teammates are excited to go to Atlanta.
Pig Bear?
Tigers and the Jaguars in the Celebration Bowl. That'll be a good matchup here.
Up next, we're going to head over to the SEC. Now, Florida can make this conversation a lot easier if they win. And they did just that. A controlling, dominant win for the Gators, 24-17. They come back to win over Tulane in Atlanta. Danny?
Yeah, great win for Florida and a great uniform game as well. So this matchup was really fun. And great job for Florida for claiming it. And now it's a question of whether they should jump Oklahoma State and Oregon. So we'll have to see. But, great job for them. And congrats to Tulane for making it. I'm sure they're happy to at least go up at least.
Now the Gators get their first SEC championship since 2016. Florida now ties LSU for second most all time with 12 SEC championships. LSU winning the conference last season, if you remember. Alabama still holds the record for most titles all time with 17. Now we head to the Sun Belt Championship, where FAU, much like Oklahoma State, was looking to cruise, but it was not so easy. They lose 35-28, but that's not what's spectacular here. They lost to Troy. Now, Troy was the first conference champion in 2KU history to make it without being above 500. The Trojans were 6-6, finishing 6-2 in conference play, getting in over 3 9-3 teams in Arkansas State, South Alabama, and North Texas, and they are going to make those what-if debates completely irrelevant. by stealing it from FAU, capturing their first conference title since 2007 and their second all time. Danny?
Wow. Just wow, FAU. I'm surprised that happened. Okay. FAU, they beat Troy just like 2 weeks ago, and here they are losing to Troy now. Troy is now 7-6. I mean, it's better than being 6-7, but FAU had everything to lose and just did.
Pig Bear? Pig Bear?
Dog ran in on and jumped on me. Sorry.
All right.
So, but yeah, good job to FA. I mean, Troy for beating FAU. What a shocker.
None of us
Most
had that
viable
in
at
our
500,
None of us had that in our books.
500, and they win the. Yeah.
All right. Now with Oklahoma State's loss, Penn State's stoked because all they would need to do was beat Wisconsin, which they did before, to make the national championship near guaranteed. The Nittany Lions are undefeated, and they remain so in a close last-minute battle with the number 8 Badgers. Penn State pulling out in the end 24-17 to claim the Big Ten championship. This is now the Nittany Lions' sixth conference title, tying them with Indiana all time. It was their first conference chip since 2016. Danny?
Yeah, great job by Penn State for taking care of business against Wisconsin. It's hard to beat a team twice, and Penn State was able to do it. And, well, I'm sure they are all willing to clinch their ticket to New Orleans for the championship game. And for Wisconsin, well, you still had a great season. It was better than the last few years, so at least they have that opportunity to keep their head up.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, just good job at Penn State and Happy Valley to NOLA.
That's for sure. The debate now comes to who is number 2. You have a Florida, you have an Oregon, and an Oklahoma State, even a Virginia Tech, potentially.
You also have a UCF.
UCF is likely on the outside looking in on that scenario, but we'll find out next week what it is. Find out next week what it is. They may be able to claim it. Let's say if one of those one-loss teams beats Penn State in the Natty, and let's say if UCF wins their BCS Bowl, then they would be able to claim it. But up next, we have the Big Ten Championship. Or I already did the Big Ten Championship. Whoops. Next, we have the WAC Championship for the first time out in Las Vegas between the two winningest members still in the WAC. At least that will be next season. In Hawaii and New Mexico State. NMSU has had a pretty dominant stretch in the conference from 2019 to present. They won it in 2019, they won it in 2021, and they get a third title in 5 years with a 42-28 dominant win over the Rainbow Warriors. NMSU with that now ties Hawaii for the winningest member currently in the conference. Danny, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, probably a bloodbath from New Mexico State against Hawaii. I'm sure some people were expecting this, I'm sure, but also New Mexico State was able to take care of business, and they've been on a streak since week 0.
Pig Bear?
Both Aggies taking care of business, getting it done.
All right. The Aggies are likely to make a BCS bid as the best team outside of the power conferences. Also getting a BCS bid for the first time automatically this season will be the Mountain West. They've been relying on at-large bids, though they are still a regular appearance. Now they finally guarantee it. From Denver, Colorado, the Mountain West Championship, number 9 TCU taking on number 13 Utah in the snow. And we had a great game till the end. Another one decided by a last-second defensive stop as TCU beats Utah 21-19 to return for a second straight year to the BCS Bowls. Danny?
Yeah, this was a really big game because Utah had to prove why they were there. Because remember, there was an entire four-way tie that then led to who had the better overall and who played against who and who beat who between them and Boise State. So they had a lot of proof to this game, man. Well, TCU was too much to handle as they got the revenge against the Utes.
We nearly had a coin. Could you imagine the horrors? Pig Bear?
I really wish it came down to the coin. That would have been the best in college football history. But good job, TCU.
All right. TCU was locked into that no matter what. An interesting record as both these teams will be going to the Pac 12 next season. But just before they go, TCU now passes Utah and BYU to become the winningest program in conference history with 6 conference titles. They hadn't won it since 2017. Utah, TCU, San Diego State, and SMU will be Pac-12 members next year. The winningest member still in the conference with 4 titles is last year's national champion, Boise State. I'll wrap up the conference championships. We will not have a top 25 for you this week. The top 25 numbers are going to be saved for next week since we don't want to spoil not only the bowls, but who makes the national championship. Army and Navy are not going to be our only game next week, and they are not going to be in competition for that role. Unless Army wins 2 more and ends up at the end of the year in the top 25. It's likely that what poll we have ends up being it. Regardless, we could still quickly again talk about that conference champion or that national championship debate. You have 4, 5, even 6 teams. You had 6 teams entering the week that could have made it. Now, with the top 2 teams with one of the top teams in that field losing, meanwhile all the other teams got their business handled. Now what do you do? Interesting conundrum. Oklahoma State 12-1, Oregon 12-1, Florida 12-1, Virginia Tech 11-1, UCF 13-0 in a non-power conference. Penn State is probably the only constant. They're likely in regardless since they are still undefeated. But who is the number 2? Who do you guys think it is, Danny?
As much as I would love it to be UCF, I don't think they're going to make it in. But if it's not going to be UCF, I'm going to probably put my vote on Florida. They had the most dominant win out of all these guys. They actually played for the conference championship. And, well, they had a really good season. So I do think, for me, at least in my opinion, I would think Florida would get in under my vote.
Pig Bear?
I'm going to go very outside pick here, but I'm going to say Vatek. All year, they beat everybody up until Virginia. And it's a rivalry game, you got to take that out, but Vatek would beat pretty much half the teams. Vatek would beat Florida, Vatek would beat Oregon.
Yeah. I think of the field,
I'll say here.
I do like Florida as a likely number 2, but I think if I pick the best team here, I think I would go with Oklahoma State. Even in spite of them not winning their conference, Oklahoma State, much like Virginia Tech, has been super dominant. They have the bonus of actually playing for their conference championship, and also they've already beaten Baylor. They have a win against the team they lost to, so that might end up being a moot point regardless. Comparing their losses, Oregon's loss was to Oklahoma State, who is already in this conversation. Virginia Tech's loss was to a Virginia team who, yes, won the ACC, but didn't have 10 wins until this week. Penn State's already in the conversation. UCF had a very strong conference to play through, but it's nowhere near as tough as the Big 12 that Oklahoma State had to go through. And Florida's loss was to a Vanderbilt squad that's only barely making bowl eligibility. I think looking at their resumes, even in spite of not winning the conference, I think the best team here would be Oklahoma State. It would be an unprecedented move. It would be the first time we've ever had a conference champion, or a national championship game with a team who didn't win their conference. We were saying that would probably be the case for Virginia Tech. We didn't think it would happen to Florida State or Oklahoma State. I'm getting my realities mixed up.
We didn't think a lot of things would happen to Florida State today, but who knows?
Florida State not going bowling likely. All right, we have the FCS playoffs. We'll get to that in a second. But right now, I want to hand out some awards. The players of the year for each conference. There will be an offensive and defensive player of the year for all of the FBS conferences listed out. We're going to get started with the ACC Offensive Player of the Year. It has been quite a turbulent year for the ACC and for this team's main quarterback specifically. But ultimately, he's a Heisman finalist, and it feels the most right to bring him in. The ACC Offensive Player of the Year, of course, Travis Heller, quarterback for Clemson. The ACC's Defensive Player of the Year was a bit of a dark horse candidate, but Grayson Royal, the defensive back for Duke, gets the position. In the AAC, the Americans Offensive Player of the Year, Bailey Levitt, quarterback for Jacksonville State. Their Defensive Player of the Year, Case Payne, the linebacker for Charlotte. And the Big East Offensive Player of the Year, hovering at the bottom of the Heisman list for almost all this year, David Cole out of Boston College was the lead signal caller that brought the Eagles a conference championship. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Max Underwood, fittingly nicknamed the Undertaker, a defensive end for West Virginia, led the Mountaineers to the Big East title game. Offensive Player of the Year, potential Heisman favorite Maurice Powers from Penn State gets the Big Ten's nod. Meanwhile, the Big Ten's Defensive Player of the Year going to Morgan Van Bowie, a defensive back out of Michigan. Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, Heisman Trophy nominee Alan Bonner, the running back for Oklahoma State, our first running back off the board. And on the defensive side, Cooper Mack, defensive back from Kansas, takes it. On CUSA, the Offensive Player of the Year was Aaron Herron, a wide receiver for UCF. And the Defensive Player of the Year is Adrian Strong, a linebacker for Liberty. The Ivy League's Offensive Player of the Year, Shannon Perry, a running back for Columbia. He was on that 10-win Columbia team last season. Defensive Player of the Year, Nick Fortune, linebacker for Dartmouth. The Max Offensive Player of the Year went to the bricklayer, the toughest man in football, Pat Johnson, quarterback from Eastern Michigan. The Defensive Player of the Year going to Donovan Beasley, a linebacker from Akron. In the Missouri Valley, the Offensive Player of the Year was William Walker, lead quarterback for Southern Illinois, leading them to a MAC title. Their Defensive Player of the Year, Bill Bond, defensive tackle for Chicago. In the Mountain West, the Offensive Player of the Year was Titus Robinson, quarterback for Utah, transferred from Texas A&M in the offseason. The Defensive Player of the Year, Zane Fernandez, defensive back for New Mexico. Out of the Pac-10, no surprises here. Andrew Burnett, quarterback for Oregon, is the Offensive Player of the Year, while on defense, it's Johnny Suarez, a defensive back for Stanford. Out of the SEC, the Offensive Player of the Year went to Cody Crenshaw, running back from Auburn, and Defensive Player of the Year, Maurice Winter, defensive back, Mississippi State. In the SoCon, the Offensive Player of the Year was Chad Daniels, the quarterback for Appalachian State. And on defense, also from Appalachian State, William J. Fortner, a defensive lineman. From the Southland, the Offensive Player of the Year was Ryan Waters, quarterback for Sam Houston. And Defensive Player of the Year, Thomas Arnett, a defensive lineman for Abilene Christian. Interesting, Abilene Christian got a Player of the Year in their first year in eligibility. Out of the Sun Belt, Offensive Player of the Year, senior Saxon Klein, a running back for FAU. And Defensive Player of the Year was C.J. Williamson, linebacker for South Alabama. From the WAC, the Offensive Player of the Year went to Dwayne Stallings, quarterback New Mexico State. No surprises there. But out of the defensive side of the ball, Horatio Mann, defensive back for Cal State Fullerton, won the WAC's nod for Defensive Player of the Year. That'll wrap up that category. Any standout names for you, Danny?
No, not really. Just congratulations to all these guys and great job for them winning all these awards. Soon, we might have ourselves have to announce a Heisman Trophy where someone's going to need to win it big.
Heisman Trophy the Heisman Trophy winner will be announced next Sunday on the next episode of 2KU Weekly. Stay tuned for that. Pigbear, do you have any big names you like to shout out here?
Eller for Heisman. I mean, just good job to everybody who made it.
All right. We'll have plenty of awards to give out that night. Now we're going to go to the FCS Playoffs. If you've been paying attention, we've been posting on the Discord server the scores of the lower tier playoffs. Namely the Division 3 and Division 2 playoffs. The D3 playoffs are already in their third round this Saturday, while D2 starts off round 2. But meanwhile, starting this week will be the FCS playoffs, the highest level of football below D1 FBS itself. We're gonna take you through that. The playoffs are tweaked once again. This time it's only a 32-team bracket. Make it much more simplified than before. Each group has one of 4 seeds, and 4 teams play in one site for regionals. Under the super regionals, super regionals take the higher seed into account, and the final 4 will play in the championship semifinals in Frisco, Texas. Let's get things started. The number 1 overall seed, once again, the Albany Great Danes, remain a dominant force in the FCS. Can they finally win that natty that's been evading them for the longest time? They get to play against the winner of the upcoming Celebration Bowl. Well, that being between Savannah State and Southern. Now that's the one thing that's different. The winner gets that automatic berth. Meanwhile, also in the Albany group, we have a matchup between Montana in their first season back to the FCS against Michigan Tech. To the other side of the bracket, the Valparaiso Beacons take on the Charleston Southern Buccaneers, and the Tennessee State Tigers play the Marist Red Foxes. On to another regional, this time in Fairburn, Georgia, the final year of FCS membership for the UGF Pandas. If you know, you know. They'll be taking on the AIC Yellow Jackets. The winner gets the winner of the Montana State Bobcats and the Ferris State Bulldogs.
Chains Yellow Jackets? Can't believe Allison Chains is a college now.
American International. From St.
My
Charles,
bad.
Missouri, the Stony Brook Seawolves take on the Campbell Fighting Camels, and the Lindenwood Lions will play the Dayton Flyers. Our second seed in the bracket is UC Davis. They play the Robert Morris Colonials, getting the winner of the Monmouth Hawks and the Maine Black Bears. Next, the Wofford Terriers in their final FCS season. They'll be playing in the SoCon next season. Take on the North Dakota Fighting Hawks, who have returned to the FBS this year. And the regional host in Cheney, Washington, the Eastern Washington Eagles, in their 1 year as an FCS independent before returning to the Mountain West, will play the Murray State Racers. And our final group for the 3 seed, the Sacramento State Hornets in Sacramento, California, play the Davidson Wildcats, also moving to the SoCon next season. The winner gets the winner of the Morehead State Eagles and the Lehigh Mountain Hawks. Our final regional, the New Britain, Connecticut regional, the Towson Tigers, who, if you remember, beat South Carolina earlier this year, take on the Weber State Wildcats, and the region hosts the Central Connecticut State Blue Devils, play the San Diego Toreros. All right, looking at this field, who do you guys think will end up the FCS champion this year? Danny?
This one is hard, but I'm going to put my money on Sacramento State. Something about them gives me some good energies into making this. If I had to pick another one, maybe formerly FBS members Montana. Hopefully. Maybe someday they could return.
All right, Pig Bear?
I'm going to go with Montana to win it.
Picking Montana as well. Would be a bit of dark horse run. How about we've had in back-to-back years now the FCS champion moving up to FBS. North Dakota in 2021, they'd moved back, obviously. But in 2022, it was Kennesaw State, who is a member of the American. How about we do it 3 in a row? Give me UGF to run the table. Give me the Pandas to win the national championship. Hail yeah. If you know, you know.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
We know. All right. We don't have any big scores to go over. This is a bit of a shorter episode, but we can jump straight into the game of the week, which is true. It is the game of the week. The Army-Navy game for the first time out of Foxborough, Massachusetts. It used to be Philadelphia for the longest time, but it's been bouncing site to site now. This will be a later game. We saw some still killer uniforms. We always do for the Army-Navy games. They always bring their A game on designs. And hopefully for play, they don't disappoint. Last year, we had an unprecedented game. 4 overtimes. I believe 50-plus points scored on both sides. This is not your grandfather's Army-Navy game last season. Will we see something similar to that this season? I doubt it, but it would be fun. I think both teams are going to give it their all. Navy wearing the silent service uniform, paying tribute to the U.S. Submarine Force. Army wearing the dog-faced soldier uniform to honor the 3rd Infantry Division. Looking at these two teams in terms of record, it does not look very even. The Army Black Knights are currently sitting at 8-4 on the year, losing to Syracuse, Wake Forest, UMass, and Liberty. They won their last 2 straight against Holy Cross and Georgetown, though. As for Navy, it's not very good. Navy is currently 2-10 on the year. It has just not gone the way of the midshipmen. They lost their last 4 straight, and they've lost 8 of their last 9 entering this game. Army assumedly favored by a lot, though of course chaos can happen. Navy did win last season, obviously. All right, no more beating around the bush. Who do you guys have in the final regular season game of the year? Danny?
Give me the 3rd Infantry Division. Give me Army to win this game.
Mm-hmm. All right, of course, as an Army family, I gotta say, go Army, beat Navy. Pig Bear, who do you have tonight? Or this Saturday?
As someone who comes from the complete opposite, go Navy, anchor down.
You're picking an upset for the 2nd straight year. All right. And that will do it for tonight's relatively short but sweet episode. Don't worry if this one was lacking. We got plenty more coming next week, as we've got Heisman Trophy winners. We got awards to hand out. We're going to talk about this game, of course. We've also got, of course, all the bowls to reveal. It's going to be an action-packed episode, as much as you can with a podcast, but stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching, and so long from the 2KU.